Hi, it's us.
Hello there.
How are you? How are you?
I'm good, thanks. How are you?
I'm fine. It's warm today. So I feel like today our lighting is problematic, but whatever. I guess we'll do whatever we do in lieu of someone who can do this better than we can. See, I'm all it's frustrating. Okay. Anyway, uh, today we're going to talk really briefly about the word disease and how it relates to alcoholism. Because Dr. Mary and I have this conversation periodically where we talk about, we just talk about the word disease. It just went away. So, Dr. Mary, ever the scientist, thought we should look the word up. Disease. Noun. A disorder of structure or function in a human, animal, or plant, especially one that produces specific signs or symptoms or that affects a specific location and is not simply a direct result of physical injury. Second definition is a particular quality, habit, or disposition regarded as adversely affecting a person or group of people. Oh, that's interesting, because I would view it as being the second. A particular quality, habit, or disposition regarded as adversely affecting a person or group of people. Thank you, Oxford Languages.
There you go.
So the reason that we brought this up is because you reference alcoholism as being a disease, which is what you learned at rehab,
Yep.
and which is what is confirmed in AA.
Yes. And it is legally and officially recognised as a disease by international medical practices and federal law in this country.
So it doesn't feel like a disease to me, because a disease to me feels like something that happens to you outside of your control.
Mm-hmm.
Do you want me to keep speaking?
Yes.
And I feel like you had control of this for a long time. I mean, if I have wine and I have too much wine, I controlled that. It wasn't that the wine didn't make me drink too much. The whiskey didn't make you drink too much. So just talk a little bit about how you reconcile that, because I'm not saying I'm right. I just think that this is kind of an interesting paradox, and I don't think I'm alone in wondering about this.
Well, the way the way an addiction works is it stimulates what can still be classified as the pleasure centre of your brain. The technical term for it is the ventral tangential region, but it's in the most primitive part of your brain. And there's a neuron called the nuclear accumbens that sends a link from that directly to your frontal cortex, which is stimulated when something your brain records as pleasurable.
Okay.
Now, everyone's biochemistry is different, so there is a stimulus in that a certain percentage of people will have a condition where that gets slightly overstimulated. Now, the reason for that is largely unknown. It can be behavioural, it can be, some people say it can be learnt. There have been genes isolated that suggest their role as overstimulating part of that arc. But the bottom line is, when that's stimulated and that nerve reflex goes to your frontal cortex, your frontal cortex is you. It's decision making, it's your behaviour, it's every thought you've learnt throughout your life stored in there, with how you will respond to something, what interests you have, what makes you sit up and pay attention. And when your body wants to re-stimulate your pleasure centre, your entire frontal cortex does get rewritten. That the only thing you care about then is setting off that biochemical reaction that makes that part of your brain feel pleasure. Because it's localized in a certain area and it's affected afflicted by something else. That's what makes it a disease.
Well, okay. So this is a question you can't answer. You can just have an opinion on. Why are we so reluctant then to classify alcoholics as the same thing we would classify cancer survivors or people who have MS? I mean,
Well, they are, because they are people who suffer from a disease. They are classified the same.
not societally though. Do you know what I'm saying? Legally, they might be, but there's no comparison to a young, a 50-year-old. Well, here's a perfect example. So we just learned from our neighbor that one of her coworkers' husbands, who's a year older than you, had a heart attack. We felt instant empathy for them. He's young, he's healthy.
They have a couple of young
They have
children.
young children. We didn't judge him. We didn't think to ourselves, well, what the heck's kind of diet is he having? We immediately felt empathy. But that is not the response that most people have to finding out that someone has been diagnosed with alcoholism.
I see what you mean. I don't know how some people react to certain things. I mean, if someone tells you someone's got lung cancer, I think one of the things that you would immediately jump into your head was, well, did they smoke?
Yeah.
Yeah, smoking is without doubt a leading cause of lung cancer, but if you can get lung cancer and you've never smoked a day in your life. So that doesn't exactly answer your question, but it's always an assumption. And I think certain people still view an addiction as, maybe dirty.
Yeah.
Or it's lazy. I've heard some people refer to it as, well, it's lazy, isn't it? Well, you don't wake up one morning and think, you know what, I'm going to actually start drinking way too much. It's a disease that does creep up on you. And by the time it has crept up on you, you're actually in no position to actually without help, want to stop. And until you can actually admit to yourself that you have a problem, that's where dealing and treating and living with that disease comes to it. But you know yourself, it's getting to that point is the problem.
Yeah.
Because another symptom of being an addict is you do go into complete denial and you do become a chronic but very bad liar.
Yes, that is true. So partly I wanted to bring this up because an acquaintance of mine wrote to me after, I think, our last live stream to tell me that she and her husband are having some problems. She didn't go into details. I'm assuming that they are based around addiction, but that's a little bit of an assumption on my part. And she has decided to stay with him to work through it. And she told me how judgmental people in her life are being of her. So maybe the point of this is, and let me just preface by saying that pre-February 1st, 2017, or maybe somewhere earlier than that, I would have had plenty of judgmental feelings about addicts too. But let me just say, if you're not living with an addict, if you're not an addict, it's not helpful to be judgmental. It's helpful to ask somebody if and how you can help. And then to be sincere in that and to uphold it as long as you can. Because believe me, the two people or the family or whoever is involved in this addiction already feels guilty enough.
That's true. And just to go back to your question about there is a stigma to it. I've actually met alcoholics that think that drug addicts, there's something more wrong with a drug addict than an alcoholic. I mean, that's it's the same thing.
Yeah, but
just,
don't you think
you
we
just-
like to
you-
hierarchically
yeah,
rank things?
I guess. I mean, I know people who are both. It's just terrible. I mean, I had with some great help and some great support, from you especially, that I was in a hole that I could get out of, but a drug addiction is a deeper hole.
Do you think so?
I do. I absolutely do. And then there'd be both.
Yeah.
I mean, people who actually take drugs to be sober enough to keep drinking, or the other way round. I mean, my gosh, my addiction disease thankfully got addressed way before that particular stage.
Yeah. Well, that's kind of all. We're going to test out some kind of shortish live streams.
Try and keep them a little short.
With kind of one theme or one question. So if you have questions, here's what's kind of incredible. Obviously, Dr. Mary and I have decided to be open books about this. There's very, very little of that journey that if you followed us through those 9 weeks, you don't know about. There are definitely things that I will never write about. But mostly you know almost what I know. And interestingly, mostly I think you know what Dr. Mary was thinking. So if you have questions, if there are things that you would like us to talk about, you can write to Dr. Mary or to me privately. We will never reveal your names. We'll never give information so that people could figure out who we're talking about. But believe me, if you're wondering about something, so are other people. I listened to a podcast earlier this week, Love After Addiction, and she divorced her husband, who was an addict, and is now remarried and whatever. But everything she talked about was like I was immediately back 4 or 5, 6 years ago. I knew instantly what she was talking about. So we're happy to be whatever resource we can be for people, if that's useful to you. You can write to me at dana@extraordinaryextraordinary.com, or you can send us messages on Facebook. But again, we'll keep everything super private. And yeah, I think that's all. Thanks for the clarification.
Oh, well.
A little science.
Thank Google. We looked at a little Google search for what actually a disease is. So yeah, a little bit of science in there for you.
Oh, we have a question. Dr. Mary, what do you think in regard to drug addiction being worse than alcoholism? It seems like it would be true, but she would like to know your thoughts. We did address this a little bit. You might have come in late, but you do think it's worse.
There are more
harder, not worse.
It's harder. The stimulation in your ventral tangential region or your pleasure center, and the effect it has on your frontal cortex, which is your personality, is much stronger with certain drugs than it is with alcohol. So that relearning who you used to be is a lot harder because the lingering effects of wanting to have that stimulus because it was stronger is more acute in drug addicts than it is in alcoholics. Now,
which is,
also,
I guess, why people can be casual drinkers, but you don't hear of casual meth addicts.
No.
Yeah.
And one of the tragedies of that is a lot of meth addicts. They generally go into two categories. One, it's people who the option they have left because they have become addicted to prescription painkillers.
Plus meth, or just...
they end up taking meth to get the same high as taking a safe but extra dose of a painkiller because it's an opioid. Yeah. I mean, these painkillers are just plumb nasty. And then when your prescriptions run out, a lot of people end up going to clandestine meth dealers. And some people try to lose weight.
Yeah, man, I have wanted to be thinner my whole life. Not that badly.
The tragedy of that is in the 70s when you could buy diet pills. That's what they were, methamphetamine.
Well, isn't that what's in fen-phen?
Yeah.
I mean, was in fen-phen? I don't think that's still being produced. Okay, That's it. 15 minutes, one topic. How do you define disease? And how is something that you elect technically a disease? And why is it societally not accepted? And the big, big takeaway to all of this is do a little more listening and a little less judging of those who are in this journey. Because believe me, it's no piece of cake, and your judgment doesn't make it better. All right. Thanks for listening. Watching. We'll see you soon.
Take care. Everyone stay safe.
Bye.